Section 2.3 and 2.7, quadratic functions and their zeros. What is a quadratic function? Well, a quadratic function has degree 2, meaning that the highest power we can have is 2, and it is of the form f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers. Now note that a cannot equal 0, because if a equals 0, then we no longer have a function of degree 2. So what is the domain of the quadratic function? Well, we've talked about domains before, and if you recall, we said that if you have a fraction, you cannot have zeros in the denominator. If you have an even root, you cannot have negative numbers in the radicand. The radicand is the thing inside the radical, and we cannot have negatives in there. There's also logs and natural logs, but we haven't gotten there yet. So we take a look at a quadratic function. It doesn't have fractions. It also doesn't have even roots. Therefore, our domain is all real numbers, or negative infinity to positive infinity. And a quadratic equation is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. It's the same thing as a quadratic function, only now we set it equal to 0. What are zeros of a function? Well, we have talked about zeros already in this course, and the zeros are simply the x coordinates of the x-intercept. In other words, to find the zeros of f, we solve the equation for f of x equals what? I can ask this question in another form. If you're looking for the x-intercepts of a function, then you set what equal to 0. If you said y equals to 0, you are correct. And another form or another way to write y is f of x. So we can just write f of x equals 0. And then you solve for x, and that's how we find the zeros. Now, there are 3 methods of solving a quadratic equation. The first one you've seen already, and that's by factoring. But what if you can't factor? Can you think of 2 other methods of solving quadratic equations? If you set the quadratic formula, you are correct. Quadratic formula. And we did see this formula in a previous section, but I will remind you of what that formula looks like. And I also told you a little story to help you remember. And here's the story. So to find the x value of a quadratic function or a quadratic equation, we write x equals, and here's my little story. The negative boy couldn't decide if he wanted to go to the radical party, so he was squared and missed out on 4 awesome chicks, and the party was all over at 2 a.m. What's the third method of solving a quadratic equation? Completing the square. In the next video, we're going to go over these 3 methods. So please join me for part 2. Thank you.